You want to know what was my first YouTube video ever? Here it is. Yeah. Remember when we were actually excited to see this? Can't believe it was like 10 years ago, huh? Hey guys, this is Dynamite X246. My real name is Diego Zenteno, and what you just saw was basically the beginning of me and YouTube. And since then, YouTube has pretty much became a large part of my life for like 10 years. I've seen like so many videos that inspired me, gave me ideas, showed me information. Yeah, it's basically my only pastime for a while. And since then, I've been opened up to a lot of shows and games. Basically, a lot than I could possibly imagine before I discovered YouTube. So essentially, what I'm doing here is just talking about a lot of nostalgic memories I had for the past 10 years, not just on YouTube. Because ever since 2016 ended, all of a sudden I just sort of felt a little sentimental. And it took me a while to find out that 10 years have passed already. 10 years ever since that first video I discovered about a certain game that I was excited for, but couldn't get because I didn't have the right consoles. Boy. Imagine if I, played it instead of, Regardless, it was these 10 years that made me who I am right now. And I couldn't help myself but share all my experience and all the things that I remembered fondly. So, here we go. It doesn't take a genius to tell you that I'm a huge Sonic fan. I played the Sonic Adventure games, the Mega Collection. I even watched Sonic X with pride. I mean, I consider it one of my favorite shows back then. Next to Ed and Nettie, but I'll get to that. Now, before I discovered YouTube, I mostly browse around Sonic websites. I also discovered Newgrounds during this time, but I was too young to watch its content. Now, around the time Sonic 06 was being announced, I scavenged for many gameplay clips or trailers throughout the internet. And that's how I discovered YouTube, by one of the Sonic trailers. And after seeing some Sonic X content in it, I mostly stuck around. That was when I got my first exposure to fan-made content. And boy was it an interesting experience. Now I must be pretty lucky to not get subjected to one of those forsaken side of the Sonic fan base, because I don't really remember seeing something like that. Sure, I saw a couple inappropriate stuff, but thank Mom for, I guess, blocking me out of that. Instead, I mostly just watch some... You know those videos that has, still images and text in front? Basically those. And they mostly star recolors. Back then I didn't mind, but... well, you learn a lot of stuff on videos. However, this is also around the time when I first saw a review. By who? Now, the Nostalgia Critic really changed my perspective on a lot of things. Back then, I've been, really passive on everything I see. But after seeing the Nostalgia Critic and how he handles bad movies and stuff, that got me thinking about what's good in things and what's bad in things. Yeah, I was that passive. Also, I always have fun watching his reviews. I mean, they're mostly the best videos I've seen when I was first exposed to him. In fact, I remember watching the first Nostalgia Kirk review I've seen was Super Mario Bros. The movie. Yeah. Another thing I forgot to mention was, while I was still in my Sonic craze, we discovered that Sonic guest starred in a certain fighting game, and it was Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, before Super Smash Bros. Came to me in my brother's life, I mostly thought about Sonic and Ed and Nettie as a crossover idea, since those were the two things I'd liked the most, and nothing else. I mean, in Sonic X, Sonic came from the human world, so it sort of made sense in my 10-year-old mind. But then, once I've seen Super Smash Bros. Brawl and how big that much of a crossover it is, it opened my mind even more. I mean, it boggled my mind to see that these characters had their own games. And it mostly introduced me to their series like Kirby and Mario and other stuff. Around this time, my brother took a big liking to Kirby, and that's how I got introduced to both his games and, well, the TV show. It also introduced to his favorite character, Meta Knight. Brawl was basically a very fun time for us, locally. However, it's said that it promised online play, but we never really got interested in it, and even if we did, it never really worked. We were going to be introduced to online gaming eventually. It all started when I was really into Metroid at some point of time, so I decided to buy a lot of Metroid games. Still craving for more, I basically checked out a lot of stores to see if there's any other media that's related to Metroid in some way. And during the search, I found out Red vs. Blue, a comedy web show that basically uses a game called Halo for its engine. It had a lot of colorful characters, no pun intended, and the comedy really got me into more mature kind of humor that I was growing accustomed to thanks to the Nostalgia Critic. However, Red vs. Blue would only be basically another stepping stone of my next interest. Now, after seeing the teaser on Halo Legends, which by the way I watched after Red vs. Blue, I basically took a huge interest on getting Halo Reach, which was like a recent game at the time. I bought myself an Xbox 360 and, well, the rest is history at this point. I played online on Halo Reach, and it really blew my mind at the time, because I was mostly accustomed to local multiplayer. I had my brother for that. But playing all around the world with different people was a different experience altogether. It even introduced me to some friends. And it also got me accustomed to online chat in general, like for Skype or eventually the PS4. I recall, always getting to my Xbox, checking my friends list, and playing the multiplayer, almost all the time for, a couple of years, and always hoping of making something like Red vs. Blue, which is called a machinima for those who don't know. It definitely felt like a different time in my life. I mean, before this, I was, focused on Sonic, and then all of a sudden I shift to Halo. I mean, ain't that a dramatic change? Although I was away for Sonic in a while, that wouldn't interrupt my craze for anime. Basically, another important part of my life is where me and my brother got into anime. And it's sort of weird because I don't really remember how exactly we discovered Angel Beats. But all I know is, me and my brother watched it, and it changed our lives. Angel Beats was the anime that introduced us to basically anime in general. this was like the first step. Even though I guess Bobobo could be the first anime we saw, but I might get into that in another discussion. Anyways, Angel Beats was a real fun time. It was very different. I mean, it's somewhat down to earth, similar to Halo, but has some fantasy into it, kinda like Sonic. The characters were basically the best part of the show. The music is memorable as hell, and the quality of the art is nothing I've ever seen before. This basically opens the door to other anime that'll come to my life, and I have Angel Beats to thank for that. While I was browsing some shows and anime, while I still had Funimation channel, I basically discovered 2 anime movies. One was Hetalia Painted White, which introduced me to the funny yet bizarre Hetalia, and Evangelion 2.0. Eventually, I would discover more about the Evangelion series. It's a pretty interesting experience. I was really into the series, for better or for worse, but it mostly introduced me to more of the anime and Japanese culture. Plus, having a glimpse of the fan base at the time was pretty interesting. I would gain some friends from it as well, but there was some other stuff that happened that I'd rather not talk about. Maybe in another discussion. Another anime that changed my perspective was Black Rock Shooter. Wanna know why? Well, it somewhat introduced me to the concept of continuity. You know how there's multiple Sonic timelines from different TV shows and whatnot? I never really understood that. Heck, I never even heard the word continuity before Black Rock Shooter. Mostly because Black Rock Shooter in any media has a different backstory. In the OVA, I sort of established that as the original backstory, and yet the anime TV show sort of treats itself like some sort of reboot with some slight changes. And there's the video game, which has a completely different backstory. And the mangas, don't get me started with the mangas. But other than that, the artistic flair of Black Rock Shooter always strike me as unique. Black Rock Shooter is yet another unique looking show for me. And it even opened some doors of ideas. I mean, if Black Rock Shooter is gonna have an ever-changing background, it sort of got me thinking of some creative ideas on what I think Black Rock Shooter should be. And then it got me thinking about what other series should be. Now, around this time, I would basically play and watch anything I could find that's really interesting. And that's where my brother took an interest in Blaze Blue. I played it with him, and, well, it became one of my favorite fighting games. And just like Angel Beats, it stars a lot of characters that really struck a chord to me, like Ragna, Noelle, and Lambda. Especially Bang. But just like Eda and Eddie, it has some characters that I'm not quite fond with. But even so, it still doesn't really get me off of the series. And I am grateful to be a part of the Blaze Blue community. It was even the first series that inspired me to do fanfiction. And let's not forget the best music I've heard in quite some time. Now, my anime craze would somewhat slow down for a while, but then it gets reignited once I've seen the show Senkai Zesso Symphogear. Although the animes that I've seen previous were not that bad, I dare even say one of my favorites, some of them, this one got me really excited while watching anime again, with moments that makes me want to fist bump in the air, thanks to the very excitable protagonist, and over-the-top action that would fit well in a Platinum game. But despite that, I sort of feel like this is an underrated anime. Now sure, it has its fan base, but I don't know, I just sort of feel like it needs a little more attention. The same can be said about Black Rock Shooter, but I digress. The last 5 years of me looking at anime consist of a plentiful amount of anime that I saw. It basically goes from Nanoha to Dimension W to Noir, and I never regretted seeing them. Back in the games, I haven't played much RPGs. However, Hyper Dimension Neptunia was a nice change of pace, with an ever so lovable cast of characters. Heck, I find myself watching the footage of the cutscenes more than playing the game. It pretty much showed me that whenever you make a series, you could always have fun with it. In Hyperdimension Neptunia's case, the sky's the limit when it comes to fun. And despite being one of my favorite RPG series, it wasn't the first RPG I played. Persona 3. Next to Sonic Adventure 2, this feels like one of the most important games that I played. I don't know if I have the right words to describe why, but all I can say is it felt like a very personal game. The entire game felt immersive, the characters felt real to me, and the ability to interact with these characters anytime I want. It made me feel like I was in the shoes of the silent protagonist. No other show, game, or anything made me feel so connected to its world. And by the time I ended it, I felt some sort of change inside. I don't really know how to describe it, but it felt like a big change. I will still never forget the hard fights and having my team have my back till the end. It's a very special feeling, remembering Persona 3. And that's pretty much it. There's obviously a lot more games and anime that I haven't went through, but this is more or less just the more important ones that I could think of. But the more I think about it, despite how amazing all these shows and games are, I think the things that it showed or taught me is even more amazing. For those who've been watching my videos, some of you may not be impressed so far, but I assure you that for all the things I've watched, played, and etc., I feel like I haven't shown my full potential of my creative ideas, and I wish to reach its peak someday. And I feel like I will be in that point. But until then, I'd rather take the long way to that point, if it means to meet more friends and learning new stuff to better myself. And if any of these shows and games taught me anything, it's possible. It's very, very possible. So, thank you for listening to me ramble for like 20 minutes. I don't know if a lot of people are going to watch this, but for those who did, thanks. I hope that you understand more about me. If you have any questions, comment below. This is Dynamite X246, signing out.